Good afternoon. Welcome to our first in-person meeting for a very long time. This is Thursday, June the 23rd, and this is the RTP, the Regional Transit Partnership, and we're anxious to get started on our meeting, and I will ask if you all have patience with me. We are working with Zoom and in person, and it's a little different. And I just appreciate everybody's tolerance. Our first item of business must be to vote as a board to allow B and Neil to Zoom. That, and we have to have a quorum to do that, and we have to vote to make that happen. So, I'm sorry.
What was the comment?
Oh, we have to vote to allow Neil and B to Zoom.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yes, per our policy. So if I could have a motion to that effect.
I move that we allow B and Neil Sherman and B, please go Curtly to join us by Zoom.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Yes. And I would like for you all to please state for the record where you are located right now for the Zoom. B, if you will tell us, please.
Keswick, Virginia.
Okay, and you're Zooming due to a medical condition.
Medical condition, yes.
Yeah. And Neil, where are you located?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia. So
And you're
we're
Zooming
60 miles away.
Okay, all right. And I think, does that make us legal on all of this? Okay, that's good. All right, excellent. So with that then, if we can have our normal introductions and go around so that everybody can introduce themselves and tell who they represent. And Garland, I'm looking at you, so would you start for us, please?
Garland, Director of Charlottesville Transit.
All right,
Ted Reed, JAUNT.
all right.
Hal Morgan, JAUNT Rural Representative.
I'm Jody Saunders, the for Peter Thompson of the CAA.
Great, all right.
Lucas Ames, John Urban Representative.
Diane McKeel, Albemarle County Board of Supervisors.
Hi, it's Becca White. I'm from UVA Parking and Transportation. We run University Transit Service.
Brian Pinkston from Charlottesville City Council.
Christine Jacobs, TJPC.
This is Shannon, TJPC. Some housekeeping notes. We turned off the HVAC because it's loud and we want people to be able to hear. So if it gets too hot, we'll decide if we want to hear or be more cool. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
And Ruth Emmerich, TJPC.
And
Gretchen Thomas, TJPC.
okay, and how about the people in the back there? Just tell us who you are, so we know.
Jim Baker with Nelson Nygaard, consulting CAT.
And you're our speaker today. That's not good. Welcome.
Juan Lee, Assistant Director of Operations for CAT.
All right, there. Okay, we had a problem, yes, and on the screen. Do a sound check and introduce yourselves.
Yes, B. Lapisto Kirtley, supervisor from the district of Rydana. And if you all don't have HVAC, it should be a very short meeting.
And Neil Sherman, Department of Rail and Public Transportation.
Great, thank you very much. We had a meeting in here yesterday and the folks at that end of the room could not hear because of the HVAC. So that's what we're trying to figure this all out, so everybody can hear. And please do let us know during the meeting if you can't hear anyone, just raise your hand and wave at us. So with that, we've had our introductions. I would then entertain a motion to approve the agenda unless there are any edits or comments about the agenda. Anything anyone wants to add? And then let's have a motion to approve the agenda. If you don't mind.
I'm moving for the agenda.
Okay, that was Becca. Is there a second?
Yes.
All right, Hal has seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, and then the next item is approval of our draft meeting minutes from May the 26th, I'm sorry, and they were in our packet as well. Did anybody have any edits for those Yes. Any catches, any errors? All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes for May the 26th.
I haven't seen them.
Okay,
I move that we approve the meeting minutes.
all right, Brian is making the motion for us. Is there a second?
Also,
Hal is seconding. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And Becca is abstaining. Are there any other abstentions? All right, then we have our meeting minutes approved. The next item we have on the agenda, matters from the public. Do we have anyone present who wants to speak? Anybody? And how about on the
If
Zoom?
there's anyone on the Zoom who would like to speak as a public, member of the public, please use the Zoom link to raise your hand.
We're looking.
I don't see anyone raising their hand.
Yeah, I don't see anyone either, so technology is something, isn't it? All right, with that then, Garland, would you like to introduce
Yes.
your, the speakers in your presentation?
Yes.
That'd be
So,
great.
thank you. So today I have with me, one of the principals from Nelson Nygaard, as consultant they hired to help us work through, our planning process. And we're going to give you an update as part of our normal process. Annually, we're supposed to come in front of the RTP and provide an update on our service model. And we're doing that today, Jim Baker, with Nelson Nygaard's on do presentation.
That's great, and I think that's over there for set up for you. Welcome, we're glad to have you here. Thank you.
I would answer slides, because that computer will be important.
Okay. Okay, well, I think Garland presented here probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, some work we had done on what we call the system optimization plan, which is looking at how to optimize CAT service to make their service more effective for riders. Of course, then the pandemic occurred during the middle of that. CAT planned on implementing that system optimization plan last year, but then they've been dealing with driver shortages like just about every other transit agency in the country, so that's been postponed. So what Garland asked us to do was revisit the system optimization plan and look at a way to phase in the service rather than do it all at once like the original plan was, so that as CAT builds up its drivers, its driver staff there to be able to start to implement the plan there. So that's what we're going to present today, just the proposed phasing of the system optimization plan. So just kind of just a recap here. Pre-COVID, CAT is running 13 routes, generally running from 6 a.m. to midnight, some limited Sunday service, but 4 routes running. And you see here on this slide some of the accessibility numbers, people within a quarter mile of bus service pre-COVID, about 62,500 overall population. So as part of the, the system optimization plan, we wanted to return service coverage back to pre-COVID levels, but in a restructured manner. And so we were looking at some new service areas in the city and the county. We felt like there was a need to expand Saturday and Sunday service and try to structure it where there would be fewer transfers to complete the trip. And the other thing was some of the end of line recovery times on the routes were very tight, so the bus would be late, there wouldn't be enough time to turn around and make that next trip on schedule. So we wanted to build in more recovery time to improve on-time performance. So next slide. So this is kind of shows what that system optimization plan looked like, where we try to improve service along the US 29 corridors, straighten some routes, make some routes more direct. We were proposing a new crosstown service and just trying to beef up service on a number of corridors to 30 minutes or better, expand the weekend service, and get some new service coverage. Like there's some new areas in Albemarle County along Mill Creek Drive and into the PVCC. As well as some of the strengthened connections between UVA and the US 29 corridor. So that's kind of a high level what the system optimization plan proposed. Well, we next just kind of walk through the proposed phasing that we're looking at. And since we can't do it all at once, but to do it incrementally.
Sorry for the interruption. We had a comment that they're having a hard time hearing online, so we're moving the microphones closer. to
That's
the mic.
right. And I confirmed with B that they could see.
Okay.
I just want to make sure they could see.
Can we put the AC on now?
I'm sorry. So does anyone have any questions?
Please, on the balance.
I just want to make sure as we go along that people don't have questions about what we're seeing right here. Or are you going to go into more detail? with
Yes.
the routes? Oh, you are. That's good.
And these are the same proposed network improvements that we saw 2 years ago. It's just we're talking about how to phase that.
That is correct.
But I'm having a hard time remembering.
So we'll walk through it phase by phase and we'll go through each round.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. So just as a system-wide basis here, next slide, please. Just the system optimization plan has had some modest gains in service coverage on weekdays and Saturdays, more so on Sundays. But what it was really accomplishing was improving accessibility at stops that had 30-minute or better service. So getting that extra frequency so that the service is more usable for riders there as opposed to 60-minute routes. Next. So I'm going to start here first with the phase 1 improvements, which we thought was kind of the most pressing needs here. We're working with Garland and Joanne here. And for weekday and Saturday service, what we were proposing to do was implement improvements on 3 routes. One is a Route 11 to get that service to the center on Rio Road. The other is to improve frequencies on the Route 6. And then the last was to restructure service on Route 2 down at Avon Street. And I'll talk through each of those individually here in a minute. The next slide. Also, right now, because of the pandemic and because of the driver shortages, CAT is not able to run Sunday service right now. So we felt like that was a pressing need to get some level of Sunday service back on the streets. So we were proposing to get the trolley back online, the Route 12, which ran pre-pandemic of the US 29 corridor, and to get service down Avon Street past the CAT garage as well for Sunday service. So a little bit about these 3 route improvements that are proposed. Next slide.
And for some, and I'm sorry to interrupt, for some of us that may not know exactly where the route numbers go,
Sure.
same old problem I have all the time. Just need, now that one clues me in because it says Rolby Square.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that people are aware of where the numbers actually go as we go through this.
Sure. So Route 2 presently does a one-direction loop, just a kind of a counterclockwise loop down 5th Street, back up Avon Street to downtown, cut through the 5th Street station. So what we propose here is to make this 2-direction service, so it's more usable for people along Avon Street, and then split the service with every other bus going either through 5th Street Station to Willoughby Square or on down, past the interstate along Mill Creek into PVCC. So two 60-minute patterns, if you will, that combine to a 30-minute service along Avon Street. And that was one of the more pressing needs that we wanted to make sure we got included in phase 1 there.
And one of the major benefits also is that going to PVCC allows us to get service to the high school.
Okay. Right, so that's really very helpful.
It's also helpful just operationally for CAT because now you have 2-direction service on Avon Street going right by the facility. So when drivers are coming on to do an afternoon shift, they can catch the bus to go up to do a relief here at the downtown transit center. So it improves their efficiency. So that's one, and then the other big improvement was Route 11, which really just a minor alignment adjustment there. You know, there's been a stated need to serve the center on Rio Road there, so it's just getting that service to that center there. To accommodate that, we had to take out a little loop there along the alignment, but basically running like it is today, but with that service to Rio Road.
So, if you guys need to jump into if you have questions, please. I just want to make sure for the center, because I know Peter's been very concerned about the center. That still is not going to, the southbound service is still not possible. That's what I'm seeing there.
That is correct, because
Because that's one of his concerns.
yeah, now it's a safety issue with the buses not being able to turn left out.
That's not a cat issue. That is,
Right.
that's a safety concern. I can't go across an uncivilized intersection, 6 lanes of traffic.
Yeah, and I remember that. It's just that I was thinking about Peter since he's not here, because he's been very concerned about getting that service.
And it wouldn't qualify for a traffic signal.
So according to VDOT, which is taking a look at this, it doesn't meet the warrants to allow for a civilization because there's already 2 signals further down the line. That may be exact words.
Right, now, that area is going to see some, a roundabout is going to be, I mean, there are multiple traffic improvements that are going to be going in that area. So at the end of the day, but they're a lot ways away, so.
And there's no way to get a waiver on stuff like that.
Not that I'm aware of. We've had a conversation with, Beck was in those meetings with the team. We tried everything that I know how to try to figure out whether there was a way for them to either temporarily allow us to drive. They were like, no.
It is a challenge to get those waivers from VDOT.
They were concerned about the timing of the lights that were called a potential backup. And some other traffic safety issues.
So there's one other improvement that is part of phase 1 that doesn't have an alignment change, so I didn't do a slide. That's Route 6 that goes from downtown to Willoughby Square by Crescent Hall. So that route currently is at a 60-minute frequencies, proposing that as part of phase 1 go to 30-minute frequencies as well. So I know that's been a stated need for some time. So very modest improvements for phase 1 to accommodate, just it's going to take time to build up the drivers and to get some improvements going. Phase 2 is looking at improving service along the US 29 corridor. And so basically it's 2 route improvements there that are proposed to Route 5 and Route 7. And maybe go to the next slide, I can talk about each of them.
I'm sorry, previously the NJ phase 2 was adding Sunday service, so this would be after you had Sunday service?
Yeah, phase 1 included
Just 3 routes on Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay, so this Route 5 would be after you do the Sunday service?
So
Yes.
Okay, so it's, okay. Sorry, I'll just get my numbers next to you.
that's a good
And
point.
I can't wait for this, so that's why, this is my favorite one.
So, yeah, that's a good point for the Sunday service. Because of the driver issue there, we're proposing for phase 1 to start Sunday service just from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then as drivers, there's more availability to be able to expand that to more like a 16-hour, 17-hour day there, where you would have 2 shifts of drivers for each route.
Well, just to be clear, so the first thing you would do are the Route 6, Route 11 stuff. Then the next thing would be the Sunday daytime stuff.
Yep.
And then this.
this is in the next phase, phase 2. There's a few routes that we're implementing phase 2. So if you think about timing wise, it's probably phase 1, 3 months later, phase 2.
Okay, 3 months in between, not 3 years.
Assuming we can get the drivers there
Okay.
to make it happen. That's goal wise.
Just for 3 routes, Sunday service for 3 routes, and to start off with. It would be the trolley, it would be that Route 2A that goes down Avon Street, And it would be the Route 12 that goes up, that used to go up to the US 29 corridor, to Walmart and to Fashion Square.
The number of drivers really affects our ability to add service on the weekends. Because if you're really talking about the number of drivers that we have, we're using them primarily Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
So having the additional drivers and being able to adequately space their work allows us to get the Saturday and Sunday service.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So routes 5 and 7 are the two main routes that CAT has that serves the US 29 corridor that has, so much activity there, so much employment and such. And right now, Route 7, starts here at the Downtown Transit Center, goes to Barracks, and ends at Fashion Square Mall. The Route 5 currently starts at Barracks and goes to Fashion Square, then on up to Walmart. Well, Walmart's such a major destination. We wanted to try to get that route on that shopping center on a route that goes downtown. So what we're proposing here is kind of flipping the Route 5 and the 7. Maybe you can go to the next slide. I'll start with Route 7 first. So like with Route 7, going ahead and extending, currently it's going downtown to Fashion Square, have that one also go up to Walmart. So you have a one-seat ride for more people to get to and from Walmart. There's also, Route 7 has some, in the middle of the route, some splits where the northbound buses are operating on the east side of US 29 and the westbound are operating over on the west side, because you can't operate buses on US 29. There's just, there's no crosswalks, you have to use those side streets. So what we're proposing is that Route 7 just stay on the east side of US 29 along Hillsdale, where there's so much stuff that's happening along Hillsdale anyway. I think that would be good to have the two-direction service along that road. So that route would operate 30-minute frequencies. And once you do this implementation of Route 7, it can operate on it'll operate on Sundays as well. So we won't need to do that Route 12 that we're doing phase 1. So it'll be 7-day-a-week service doing this pattern here that you see.
And is it Route 7 the one that currently goes to Stonefield? Or am I wrong on that?
Yes. Stonefield, Emmett Street.
So it will
Seminole,
continue, even
Trinity.
though it's not mentioned, it will continue to go to Stonefield.
The shops at Stonefield? Yeah.
The Route 8 does.
No,
You're
we took
picking
it
that
out
up
of
with
the
another
eight,
one.
yes.
Okay, I
Took it
just
out
wanted to
of
make
the
sure
eight,
it wasn't
Yeah.
gone completely. Okay.
Yeah, that's where it was doing this split
Yeah.
there, where it was only serving Stonefield in one direction and, state. So
Okay,
it's just challenging with the road network there to
so I'll catch that one on another slide.
Supposedly with the hydraulic 29 work, isn't there gonna be a bridge across the pedestrian bridge, where you got that little jigsaw there?
Brian, there's a bridge that'll be going from the Stonefield side to the city side across 29. And that is a few years away.
which is why this hasn't been done this way initially. As the bridge comes in 4 or 5 years from now, we'll revisit.
And the good news is that bridge on the one side has a dedicated stop.
Right.
Transit stop, which is great, which will be off 29 itself. Or forward, I guess, in some sort of car.
Correct. So I assume it's a pull-off that allows us to safely be out on the floor of traffic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Stonefield, that's served, that's currently served by the Route 8 as well. So there'll still be service with that route. You know this one will be staying over on the side.
Okay.
If you can go back a slide. So the other change in this quarter is Route 5. So that would then just at the northern end would terminate here at Fashion Square Mall. And you can see there that just stays on the west side of US 29 and kind of serving along Commonwealth and Georgetown and such. But instead of just ending it at Barracks Road, we thought it'd be good to add some more coverage and extra service from Barracks down to UVA. So we're running it down to the UVA hospital.
Trying to cover up my smile.
I agree, that's great. This is really good.
So both for Route 7 and Route 5 on the directions that you'll be operating now that we weren't operating before. So for example, southbound on Hillsdale, or whatever the name of that road is, or eastbound on Ivy, or southbound on Topley Road, where transit hasn't run before. Do we need to speak about bus amenities on those?
So we want you to identify locations.
Yeah.
So you and I'll have a conversation about where first, where it makes sense, or whether you have already identified potential areas for us to stop.
Okay, there's a lot of construction right there at the Ivy, and then, in the public realm. So that's the UVA part, but I was just wondering also about southbound on Hillsdale, there may not be any transit amenities because transit doesn't run southbound on that road right now. So how do you get through all those negotiations and such?
Yeah, well, so a lot of talking is going to be done in the next few months, but we'd also love to have a conversation with you about whether there are students or particular pockets of areas where you may suggest that we put a stop because you're aware that there are students or faculty or.
Yeah, it's just a tiny little piece of the Route 5 and and then, we can talk about the other densities.
Yeah.
That's, I think, another reason that for phase 2, that there's so much work to do with, stop locations there that we need to be done before you can implement this.
We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there soon. So we get phase 1 and we'll have a conversation.
Okay. So then phase 3 is really just the rest of the implementation of the system optimization plan here. So I've got a number of slides that will go through a lot of these here, but let me just off the top, just some generalities here. One of the things we do for the routes that are operating on Sunday in phase 3 is we expand that span. Instead of, I think I said 9 to 5, it would be 7:30 to 10:30. So then we'll be able to have a longer span there on Sundays. And then there's one route in the CAP system, Route 1, that currently does not operate on Saturdays. So we have that operating on Saturday in the system there. So all the routes will be operating on Saturdays. And then I think probably the rest I have maps for, so we can just go through this the next slide. I'll go through each of them. So the first thing, Route 3, it currently serves Fifth Street like you see, but there's also another piece to the east of downtown that's serving the Belmont neighborhood. Well, when we looked at this a couple of years ago, most of the ridership is along Fifth Street. There's not a whole lot of ridership in the Belmont neighborhood. So we wanted to get more frequent service on this street here. So we have this at 30-minute frequencies, weekdays and Saturdays. And we just broke out the 3 on the next slide. We just, for purpose of this, just called it the 3 East, 3E, where that would stay at its 60-minute frequencies like it's doing today. So, just rather than have this having, as far as allocating the resources, the buses, the bus hours, putting it more on Fifth Street and maintaining the service here in this neighborhood.
We want to make sure we didn't cut off any neighborhoods. So this is a way of making sure that we're getting more frequent service in the areas that need it, but also not making sure we're getting any neighborhood that currently has service if they need to maintain service.
The next one, this is Route 6. We improved the frequencies in Crescent to make sure we're getting that extra service to Crescent Hall in phase 1. One of the things we're doing here is presently this route has a little mid-route deviation, if you will, up to UVA Hospital. So anyone that's just trying to get from Willoughby Square to downtown has to make that trip around the UVA Hospital. So we took that out of this route, and we proposed on the next slide, putting it on this Route 8, where you can see it's starting at Willoughby Square, and it's picking up, going to UVA Hospital there, what that Route 6 was doing. So we're still maintaining that service along that road up to the UVA Hospital.
And the north end is on, what's it on? Why do we loop around?
it's hitting the shop the stone press.
Okay, thank you, yeah.
So folks that were going from Crescent Hall, if they were going to the hospital, they would want to transfer Goldie to get to the hospital.
Or go downtown, and yeah, they'd be able to catch, a lot of frequent service from downtown.
Yeah.
What we do is get more frequent service quicker to Crescent Hall. Which is part of one of the, one of my main goals is to get more service to that area. At least get a 30-minute, but eventually get to a 15-minute service. All that deviation that we had wasn't allowing me to do that, so we need to clean that up. The amount of need to be clean.
So then Route 9, this was, I think, probably CAT's lowest performing route pre-pandemic. So we really wanted to try to do something to get some addition, to make it more attractive for ridership there. So, it was serving before downtown and the Y and just kind of circulating around, the streets around the high school. What we proposed here is extending that up to Fashion Square Mall there, where it'll have connections to the Route 7. So someone along this route can get to the Walmart, they can get to the 5 and get access to jobs, to shopping, or whatever along the US 29 corridor. And then Route 10, this one, serves the Pantops area in the hospital. And right now, it's very circuitous. It has some big loops. We try to make it more, take out the loops, but of course, we want to maintain that service to Pantops. So we try to just straighten it out a bit there, if you will, and also improve the frequency. Right now, it's operating at a 60-minute frequency. To me, there's a lot of potential, I think, in this corridor, and we were also proposing that this should be a route that runs on Sunday, especially going to the hospital. Then before I get into what this is there's other improvements as well. I don't have a slide for this, but the trolley, which is right now operating every 25 minutes. Phase 3 also has getting back to a 15-minute frequency. Mondays through Saturdays, having the long span till 11 o'clock at night and such. So then the last thing, what we call phase 3 plus, with phase 3, we still have some routes operating at 60-minute frequencies, which isn't great if you're trying to, utilize transit there. So we wanted to look at what this service could look like if every route operated at 30-minute frequencies or better, Mondays through Saturdays, and then even Sundays just during the daytime. And phase 3 is every route operating 30 minutes or better, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. All the routes also operating during the daytime at 30 minutes, and then not all the routes will be operating on Sundays, but those that do, they'll also be operating at 30-minute frequencies on Sundays. So this kind of shows here then just what that means in terms of the service requirements. So what I've got here, I'll start with the chart on the left there. We've got, you can see the phases. It starts with existing, phase 1, phase 2, etc. And each bar represents weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you look at existing, you see there's about 288 bus hours of service on a typical weekday. You can see by the Saturday is 257, 0 for Sunday today. And you can see how that buildup works there to go from existing to phase 3 plus. Right now, CAT's operating a little under 87,000 annual bus hours. This increases it by 82% by the time you get to phase 3 plus to over 158,000 hours. So not quite a doubling, but 82% increase in annual hours of service. And then also have here just kind of the daily peak vehicle requirement, how many buses you would need to have out on the streets to operate this.
So that does not include spares.
No, this is not, you would have,
Just straight up wheels on the road.
yes.
No,
So right
Am
now,
I reading it correct to go from existing to phase one would require 9 additional vehicles?
no, two.
19.
Just 19 to 21, but you don't have to look at for each.
No,
Okay.
19 to
Perfect,
21.
thank you.
Yes. So, yeah, then that's peak vehicles, as is noted there, so typically you would add about 20% on top of that to get your fleet requirements.
And these are full-size transit.
These are
35.
full-size transit, 35 for the buses. Yes. Now, our model today, we have 36 vehicles in our fleet. Today, we have 11 of them down and have been down for months. Some of them with supply chain issues with getting parts. Others are, we spent a lot of money and are at the point where we spent a ton of money trying to get them back up so we can get them to get to their end of life cycle, the 350 or 500,000 miles. We're failing in doing that because some of them are in such bad shape, but we have been awarded by the state the ability to get additional vehicles as part of our expansion model, which will help alleviate some of that pressure. But it's a 2-year window for us to get the bus. So when we order, it's 18 to 24 months. So we just tell people 2 years.
So how many buses, I'm sorry, Ms. Williams, how many buses do you say you have now?
We have 36 on property and 11 of them are down. So we have 25.
Which is really just being out, really having 20. Because you can't run all 25 buses.
Correct.
So yeah, with the 19 out on the streets today, they're really maxed out.
When you say down, tell me what that means. They're just, they won't run or there's something wrong with them or they're old.
That means, down for us means there is some level of mechanical failure that we need to fix to get it to a point where it can actually physically run. So, we are doing everything we can, and I've put pressure on my whole team. We got additional mechanics that we contract to help us. That's part of it. We don't have enough mechanics to get the job done because we are only running 2 shifts. Normal transit agencies run the mechanic shops 24 hours because you're using the downtime over the night to get a lot of your work done. We're having to pull vehicles sometimes to require FTA preventive maintenance to make sure we stay in the good graces of FTA for that. So we don't have really spares. We are really talking about bare bones, having a number just to get to the phase 1. It's going to be close for us to get even to phase 2 with our existing model.
So this is more buses up to get to phase 1.
I got to get, we're ordering, but it's a 2-year window. We've gotten more buses. We're getting smaller vehicles. I know people don't like those. We're getting 4 or more of those. But that's the interim for us because it takes so long to get the larger.
I don't like the smaller buses. Ted, did you have a question? You would like to have a question?
No,
Are standees allowed on smaller buses?
Sure. Yes, I think it's only like 3 or 4.
but do you have extra buses, Becca?
Yeah, man, I wrote down my calendar.
So I know where you like all of these.
Yeah, well,
And this is gonna be a nerdy question. You guys do any interlining in the routes?
That's
Say vehicles.
Yeah.
currently, right now, CAP does not, but this plan does introduce.
So you've already taken that efficiency.
So what was that?
What was that question? I didn't understand.
Well, there's a scheduling technique that you can have a bus on one route, working on a second route.
Yeah.
So you're using one bus on 2 routes.
Oh.
Sometimes the scheduling works out. When we did that the first time in Tulsa, we saved about 10–20% of our peak requirement.
Yeah.
And you guys are involved in that.
So, yeah, part of why we hired Jim and his team is they have, and I've used them in Richmond, is they are really efficient in getting interlining put in so you can use your existing resources to maximum performance. So we wouldn't be able to even get to where we were if we didn't use interlining as part of our method, which is it's new for our drivers. It's going to be something for them to get used to. Because normally they stay on like Route 6 for the whole time. But you may go from a Route 6 to a Route 7 to a Route 2 as you do number of trips. It's an efficient way of using the vehicles in a better way.
And on the driver thing, our drivers always stay on the same route. When we went to interlining, they loved it. Because it really made their day much more variable. So hopefully it works for you.
So we,
Yeah, we talked to the drivers about that a year or so ago, and there's a little bit of like hesitancy.
It's a lead, but once they get into it, many of them like it.
So that means they're driving different routes at
Right.
times, yes. And it's not always just the same old.
It's not as monotonous as.
And this is probably a wackadoodle question, but my assumption, Garland, is that because of your connection with the Charlottesville Public Schools, right? That you probably have mechanics that are working on both those buses.
no, I do not.
You do not.
I cannot.
You cannot.
For the funding, FTA versus local funding.
Okay.
The school buses
Uh-huh.
are done by the shop. The transit buses, we have all mechanics.
So you can't do, because that takes up my other question off the table, because I was wondering if the Albemarle County School transfer, because they have a big mechanicals. I was wondering if there's a way you could work together and get it done, but if you can't use your people transportation, you surely can't use Albemarle.
That conversation about schools is a different,
Yeah,
transit wise, our goal is to, I want to get 12 mechanics is the ultimate goal. So I have 4 mechanics per shift, and I can actually run a 24-hour service, which actually allows us, even if you're talking about 36 vehicles, and we need to be bigger to run our full model. That's still too many vehicles per mechanic, but it's better than having 2 mechanics per shift, which is what we are now.
Yeah, that's pretty well.
interesting. Okay, any other questions at this point? All right,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, talking about personnel, the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay,
Last one.
Yeah, so this last slide here just talks about the operator requirements there. So it's just showing how many operators need to be, out on the buses each day, weekday, Saturday, Sunday for, and I assume like some part-time drivers, so that's why there's some half positions there. And over on the right there shows how many additional operators would be needed over what CAP really should be having out there today. So for phase 1, to implement that, they would need to hire another 6 operators. And for phase 2, if they wanted to kind of do both phases at the same time, that's 12 additional operators. So it just kind of starts to give a sense as to how much additional staffing would be needed there.
so obviously you're not going to be starting phase 1 until you have more drivers.
So phase 1, we are hopefully, there's many things we got to accomplish, but
Right.
the sooner we get the pay scale to be comparable to JAUNT and BTS, then we can get 6 more drivers. That should not be a monumental feat to get, so which means we'll be able to implement phase 1. The jump though is getting authorization from the city and the county to fund us to make the additional resources of adding the 12 or the 27 and funding us to do so. That is, it's not a cheap endeavor. And we had that conversation before. 30-minute service, which is what's showing phase 3 plus for every single route, is an additional 46 drivers above what we are now.
Right.
That's not a small thing. That's a huge leap for us. Which means going beyond where we ultimately want to be, which we had that conversation with council before. And I told them, we're adding 70+ drivers to get to a 15-minute service. If that's where you want to be, it's just showing you really, in real terms, what it's going to take personnel-wise to make that number happen. We're at 50, authorized 50 drivers right now. We're at 50, we have 39. Go.
Physically, you have 42.
42. So we got to get to the 50 first and then add on the 6 to get to where we want to be.
Questions? I have And my questions are sort of.
Diana, make sure you speak really loud since the mics are now away from you.
So are these all of your slides?
Yes.
Okay, all right, then I have a question. I noticed on one of your earlier slides, and maybe we should go back to see where we can see the folks that are zooming, in case they have any questions. So we can see you guys. One of your earlier slides mentioned Mill Creek Drive at Monticello High School. And I just wanted to ask you, Garland, we talked about in the past, a stop for ACRJ, for Albemarle Charlottesville Regional J.
Yeah.
And I know we were talking about how expensive it was.
Yeah.
Is there anything in that, between Mill Creek Drive there and Monticello High School, is there anywhere it goes that people could actually use to get to the jail if they needed to?
So if we implement the service on Route 2, I can't remember that A or 2A. If we go to 2A, we're gonna go right out the jail.
Okay,
So the question then becomes having a conversation with the jail or with the
Right.
county about a location that would be suitable for allowing us to put in a stop.
well, it would be a conversation with the county and the city, because it's an Albemarle Charlottesville Regional J. But anyway.
Who owns
But
it?
it goes by the jail,
It's
which is
just go
good.
out of jail.
So we may be able to in the future figure something out.
Yeah, I mean, that's an easy solve. As
Yeah,
soon as we get the service in, then we would figure out a proper place to actually just put a stop.
yeah, it is kind of a shame that folks can't access transit to visit folks
Yeah.
in the jail.
And it'll be,
family.
and part of what we designed this was taking into account that we also would have service 7 days a week.
Right,
So it's not just a Monday through Friday endeavor, because people do come to the jail or need to go to other places on that corridor 7 days a week.
yeah, my sense is, I think Mark Coomer has indicated that his busiest days, I don't think he said Sunday, but I could
So
be wrong.
Sunday would
Yeah.
be perfect, we have service there.
But that's a conversation for later. B has a question, I think.
Yes. And I just want to say publicly that I'm missing Lloyd Snook.
He's on an airplane flying to a birthday party, family birthday party.
But I think Brian is a really good substitute. Having said that, if I love the plans, but if I understand this, which I fully support, but if I understand this correctly, there really isn't anything other than money and personnel that are stopping us from implementing all of this. Is that correct?
It sounds like, I think that's correct, not even there.
Money, personnel, and I gotta fix the buses. So, because my razor thin margins on the buses is a concern, that we put in something and then we have 4 or 5 buses go down. I can't implement the service now, we're looked at as being less than productive, we looked at being a failure. And I would love for us to be able to have, roll out a new service and put all of the parameters in place so we be very successful.
Okay, so it's really money for the personnel, the drivers, and additional buses.
And so to get to what B's asking, is the supply chain hurting you some on the new buses and the fixing the buses?
Hurting all of us.
Yeah.
Ted's experiencing some of that too. I don't know if that's anything new. But for us, with our contract, we have contract with Gillett. They'll tell us that you get pushed out your orders are already pushed out 6 months.
Okay, so you've heard me mention this before. Would it be, if we implemented this, would our buses be full? Or I've mentioned it before, having smaller buses, which maybe don't require the type of license that it takes to drive a big bus. I don't know that. You would know that, Garland. But smaller buses, would we be able to implement something with smaller buses and not so large buses and be able to get people
So
to
the
drive?
answer is yes, we could do that. The problem or concern that I have with doing that is the state and feds fund us to buy capital. And when we buy that capital, if our ridership grows faster than the capacity of our vehicles, they are not going to give us another vehicle because we should have planned properly to anticipate the growth, which is why they fund the big bus model to make it happen. So, and there's also a theory that if you go a bunch of smaller vehicles, you have to run at a higher level of service frequency to accommodate if you do have higher ridership, which actually exacerbates your personnel problem. So now you potentially have an issue where you got the model you want, but I gotta now add 10 more drivers, but I gotta get the frequency up on different routes, and I put the smaller vehicles.
Right, I understand that, Garland, that would cause more frequency, but the whole question relies upon the if. Have we ever had a situation where our ridership was full, where we had enough drivers and we had our buses that have been full? Has there ever been a period of time that has happened?
Yes, we have 2 of our rides that were high ridership, historically have been high. They have been high even during the pandemic. So if you talk about phasing in a smaller model, we would have to take a look. So now, I'm not saying no to that answer. I think we definitely need to look at it, but we need to be very careful about where we place the smaller vehicles.
Sure.
Around 9, which we are now trying to redesign to be more efficient, maybe the only place that I would think that we would probably want to implement a smaller vehicle model. But if that catches, if we've done our due diligence in planning the route better and getting the frequency up, we may start to get an uptick in the ridership, which also gets us right back to the issue of potentially now having to put more vehicles with additional drivers to keep the frequency up.
Well, my last comment, I do think your plan is a very good plan, and it seems to address a lot of riders. And then it goes back to the money and personnel issue or driver issue.
Thank you. But I would just say we are open to trying anything, because what we need to make sure is that we are addressing the needs, but also want to be very cognizant that if the ridership swings, I can't address it. Meaning I still have to wait out the model that the state and feds fund us unless somebody comes to the table and buys more vehicles without their money. And I still technically have to get permission to even do that. Because they tell us what we can, the level of vehicles that we can buy, and they fund us for that level.
Okay.
And I think in answer to B's question, you said the one route would be 9.
Potentially it could be 9.
And help me out with where 9 goes. Because
So-
me, I don't remember where 9 goes.
So the new modified 9 will go by the YMCA.
On up to, by the YMCA up along Hillsdale up to Fashion Square.
Mall.
11 might be another one, but those are probably the 2.
Okay, all right. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, this is really excellent. Thank you both. I guess my question is, with the regional transit vision plan that we've looked at recently, is this sort of like a first step towards that larger vision, or was it we made these changes and then, in other words, what we're looking at today is basically trying to get as much as possible out of our existing sort of infrastructure, system, network, or whatever, and to take the next step would really involve the constrained versus unconstrained would involve a lot more funding, it sounds like.
Yes, sir.
But does this mirror with, because that's what Brian's asking, I was trying to figure out, how does this mirror with what we're talking about?
It doesn't. So
Except that isn't it the baseline?
the baseline, meaning they looked at our existing model to do the unconstrained, yes.
Yeah.
But it's not, they didn't really copy these routes. We took a whole new approach and said if the slate was clean, but we looked at the pockets where these routes were existing and some of the ridership was coming from, to do that plan.
To do the baseline.
The baseline is, represents these changes. So that when you're looking at the regional transit vision, all of the gains that you get are over the baseline, and the baseline includes these
Is that correct?
I'm not sure what's the Jared Walker team did, but I'm assuming they did that. I would assume because we gave them we gave them all of our routing information. We gave them the system optimization support, the system optimization plan that we are doing. So they took, I believe they took all of that into account, but I have not had a conversation with Scott about where they started.
So they had this plan.
Yes, we gave it to them.
I think they did say they did based on the optimization.
They did, they said based on the service that would be in place a year from now.
Yes,
Okay.
and so all
That's
of
the
this,
baseline.
it's just.
Thank you. I don't remember.
Yeah, so the vision plan starts with these improvements already.
Okay.
Phase 3+.
Yes, because they're already, that was already in the plan. This is nothing, we haven't modified anything.
Yeah, phase 3, yeah, we were looking at phase 3 at the time, not plus.
So there's a sort of EPR on phase 3.
Correct.
Just a footnote on the vehicle thing, Garland mentioned supply chain issues on his vehicles. You know, we run small vehicles all the time, and we have a supply chain problem too. It's probably 1 to 3 years before we see the delivery. So going to a smaller vehicle, besides the problems you're talking about, you're not escaping the supply chain issues.
I just have a quick question. Brown, can you remind us of the status of your passenger counter issue so that we know, just a brief, if you don't mind.
So we're funded by the state feds to do APCs.
Yeah.
And that has been very successful as they've implemented. We are starting to see the baseline on our ridership numbers tick up. Even though we are running less vehicles right now, our ridership numbers are starting to tick up to almost pre-pandemic level of service.
So you're
Actually,
they're on board, you tested them, they're verified.
We are able to report to Indy, National Transit Database, in NTD reporting using APC.
Okay, that's perfect, that's great. That's good.
That's great.
That's fantastic. And then we can talk separate about the, yeah.
I don't think, if there's no more questions, I'm gonna get, Jemima, you gotta catch a flight.
Oh, goodness, we don't want you to miss your
I don't
flight.
wanna miss this flight.
Thank you.
Flights are actually flying these days.
Probably canceled. That's why I canceled, don't worry about it.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. All right, with that, I believe you have, the next one as well, don't you?
Strike. Gina Strike?
She's there. I believe she's there.
Hello, Gina.
Yeah. Hi, Garland.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Gina is with Window Architects, and she was through the Kenny Moore contracts. They are the sub. They're working on our amenities project, so I'm gonna let Gina roll into what it looks like and where we are at this point in time.
Thanks, Garland. So what we're going to talk today about this part of the presentation is really about CAT's efforts to look at the existing bus shelters along or throughout the city and the county, and to look at how we can replace them, but we can replace them in a way that helps adding to the streetscape and the community. And so we have a presentation where we've gone through a couple of different processes that we'd like to share these designs with you guys and get your feedback as part of our stakeholder involvement process. And then we'll be able to move on through other phases of the project. So we'd like to begin with why. And so why are we looking at bus shelters as an integrated whole? Why are we looking at designing them customized instead of just picking a shelter from a catalog? We're really looking at how to look at transit holistically, how to encourage people to take transit. You guys were just talking about all the routes and improving routes and getting numbers up, but part of what makes people want to take public transportation is having a place to wait for the bus, having amenities while you are there, having a system that reflects their needs, and so that they'd be more likely to be able to take transit. And you also would want to make sure that these shelters help contribute to the area itself. So right now, some of the there's a bunch of different kinds of shelters throughout Charlottesville, and they're in various states of repair. So we want to make sure that we're looking at safety considerations, ease of maintenance, so that whatever we put in is able to be maintained over time, making sure that we are looking at the consistency of the transit brand as well across Charlottesville and Albemarle County, looking at what passengers are expecting from their transit providers, and to make sure that the shelters are functional and that they look at contextual influences as well. So I mentioned we had started a process. So the process began with a visioning session with a stakeholder involvement. And we went through and looked at a bunch of different photographs of shelters across multiple systems all over the country. And we voted on them based off of if they were safe, if they were practical, if they were exciting. And we were able to take that feedback from all the different things that people liked about the shelters, along with a bunch of written items as well, and generate 3 concepts. So right now, we're presenting those 3 concepts to this committee as part of a stakeholder outreach to be able to get your feedback so that we can go through and refine those concepts. So when we started looking at the overall national scale of shelters, we also were looking around Charlottesville and Albemarle County to make sure that we were looking at both the historic context and the modern context, and how these shelter designs could translate between both different kinds of contextual points around the area. And so option 1 is a option that was developed from some architectural cues from the Downtown Transfer Center. And so it's got some of the patterning, it's got some of the feeling of materiality, and especially the distinct column shape and roof shape. So those would be able to harken back to the downtown transfer station and be able to remind people of the consistency of the brand. The back panel would be also reflective of some of the glazing patterns in the windows and represents that aged copper color. We are looking at translucency in roofs, and that's a theme that you'll see throughout most of these shelter designs to help allow light into the shelter, and how to make sure that the shelters are also open. We have a couple of amenities, which we'll get to a little bit later in some of the amenity slides, and some of our thoughts about how to incorporate local art and things into the shelter as well. We also want to make sure that the stop is clearly identified on the shelter, and that you'll be able to understand where you are in the overall context of the system. Option 2 looks at a slightly different approach. It feels a little bit more modern. It's really looking at this kind of bus iconography of here's the bus, this is how you take the bus, and that it's an element that could be lit. It's an element that could help let you know when the bus is coming, if it lights up as the bus gets closer, or just in general as an indication of the bus stops here. And to relate to that kind of idea of a transit lollipop, the shelter is also curved. It has a translucent back panel, and really looks at how to be minimal on the streetscape while being a little bit more modern as well. Option 3 feels a little bit more substantial than the other options. It has a heavier element, masonry kind of feel to it. It's going more towards some of the more historic elements of downtown Charlottesville, especially, and that it does have kind of a contrast with some modern elements in the overhead roof glazing plane. It also looks at translucency on the back panel, and that the stop name in this scenario is also very large, so that you're really understanding it almost becomes part of a different kind of iconography as we are identifying where those stops are located. It is the most open feeling of all the 3 and feels the largest of the 3, even though all of the 3 stops are within the same size parameters. So when we look at amenities and how to draw riders in, we've got a couple different things we were looking at. Bus information is at the foremost, the most important. If you don't know where you're going, you don't feel comfortable taking the bus. It's one of the biggest obstacles for transit riders is kind of the fear of the unknown, that they don't know where the route goes, they don't know where to get off, and they don't know when it's coming. So making sure that we do have schedules and maps clearly identified, and then we were looking at the naming as well, which is kind of identified with the number 3s as well as part of that information of locating yourself in the system. We're also looking at provided benches so that you do have a place to sit. Along with benches come spaces for wheelchair waiting areas as well for equitability and making sure that the stops are friendly to people of all abilities. And then we also are looking at a way to incorporate local artists or local communities into the stops to be able to help yourself as you're riding along in the bus as well as you're passing these shelters, seeing different art, seeing different color schemes perhaps as part of that art panel so that you can say, okay, I've driven by that really cool fruit graphic, I've driven by the blue one. Now I'm getting close to my stop because it's coming up next. So you'll see some of the different placements of the art panels that are identified by the number 2. Then with scalability is really important as well. So we were looking at the ability for higher frequency locations to be able to grow and still be in the same style of structure so that they can also respond to their surrounding environment and to be able to be coordinated with other routes that might be able to stop there as well. So we'd be looking at 3 different sizes, a small, a medium, and a large size. And this graphic just high level represents how a shelter could be scaled and that there might be multiple benches as part of that shelter depending upon the scale. And then lastly, maintainability. We talked about that a little bit before as well. If you can't maintain a shelter, it's not any good because we all know that the public is hard on different kinds of amenities. Hopefully, the more ingratiated it is into the streetscape and the public involvement, especially with some of the art panels, the more ownership the public might feel of it. But it doesn't mean that it's going to last forever with no maintenance. So we really were looking at modularity of components, easy to replace parts, and abilities to update information as the system continues to evolve. And so that's kind of where the project is right now. We are looking at really how to make this an implementable project so that we can start small with some pilot test projects and be able to get more of a larger scale implementation as the project moves forward.
And this would not be for every single stop. These are going to be in special locations. We do have an off-the-shelf model that we're going to use. But this would be in higher frequency areas where we want to give some character to a particular stop.
That's my first question. What triggers a no shelter, small shelter, medium or large shelter? What triggers it and how? Like if you have 300 stops, how many are in triggering this signature?
So part of why we were desperately trying to get the second piece of trying to get the APCs in because they actually gives us real data about how people are using our existing stops. So we would have a baseline from there to tell we already have like 20% or 30% of our stops are what we would consider to be higher frequency routes. Then we probably scale that towards a medium or a larger size, and then others where we wanted to particularly highlight either a particular neighborhood or a shopping center, we would do similar, but it could be on a smaller scale.
Can we take the presentation down just so we can see beef and to make sure there are no questions?
Can you take that presentation?
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. So open it up to other questions. Comments, questions?
Just a little comment. I don't know how it is in Virginia, but in Oklahoma, it tends to rain sideways. And we had some shelters that were very minimal design, just a roof. And this is on the bus rapid transit. We got a lot of complaints because it didn't provide that protection.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that'll be an issue here, but just a comment.
No, we love that kind of feedback. Part of, I think our initial concern, I mean, my initial concern was, I come from Richmond and they didn't want all of the sides because they become places for, the unhoused to park at night.
Be homeless
I guess the new term is the unhoused.
on that.
To use those as their locations for shelter at night. That was kind of almost a no-no in Richmond. So if you have a three-sided configuration, then you don't have that issue. It also allows you to scale it quicker without that wall outside.
I was just gonna say, to your point, Ted, that I believe Peter Thompson presented that memo on behalf of the CAA with some of the same concerns. With a lens towards obviously our seniors, but also I think weather was a big concern.
Go ahead.
So, is it, any consideration for trash collection, you know, and, the ability to bring power or technology or lights or whatever to, I imagine those are all sort of married together, but, any discussion during your meetings about that?
So I'm gonna start off and I'll let Jim will take over after that. We had general discussions, especially on the lighting first. I think we looked at the lighting concerns were mostly solar. I think we were trying to incorporate solar because we were concerned about trying to find a dedicated hookup spot. So the solar component provided us an opportunity to get lighting into some of these shelters. But we're also going to be cognizant of where we place them. If we can take advantage of a street light, we will. So we can move a stop from, let's say, down the street to the middle of the street where the street light is. We will, if we're allowed, we're going to take advantage of that. Because we would love to put the solar in, also have a street light in case one goes out, there's a redundancy. So we did a lot of that in Richmond, and we were trying to take the same approach here as we implement this. This will be a smaller phased-in approach to do this, because these are custom shelters that eventually they're not going to be $5,000. They're going to be a more expensive model. So we need to be very cognizant of where we place them and do our homework to make sure that we put them in the right places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, go ahead, Gina.
I'm sorry. As I say, Garland, you're absolutely right. Location is really dependent upon what kind of features or additional features that we can offer. The shelter manufacturers are doing great things with solar. It's getting more and more minimal, and it's being able to power more and more things. But we definitely want to take advantage of location to be able to either tie into any other kind of communications that might be nearby, or to be able to capitalize on ambient streetlight, as Garland was saying, or perhaps have an agreement in place to be able to have power from some of the streetlights as well. So there's a lot of different options, but it's very location dependent upon the flexibility and design strategy for that.
The trash piece was the last part of your question. So I would just say, we are always looking as a full build out of our bus shelters to potentially look at putting a trash receptacle. The problem or concern is CAT is not set up to dump the trash. So we have to work out an agreement with the locality to be able to do that. And as we
Just
work
learn
out
about the
more,
accommodation in the shelter for trash, not necessarily.
so it would be in the shelter would be a separate trash receptacle a little bit away from the shelter. We don't, I like to shy away from putting a receptacle inside the shelter, because in the summertime,
It's bees and stuff.
all that sort of stuff because of the trash. So we want it close enough that is, it's representative of being a part of that location, but not directly where somebody's sitting next to it.
Yeah, I'll get to you in a minute. Brian had a question
Yeah,
first.
This is great. Thank you for that. It's very helpful. Do you have any sense in my line of work, I really hate it when people ask me this question, but do you have any sense of like the cost multiplier from the first, medium to third? In other words, is it I mean, I thought the first one you put up, the more basic one, I suppose, was elegant, it looked scalable, it looked simple, yet still complete. The other ones seemed like they had, more fancy iconography. I mean, if you had to guess, would you say that the cost multiplier from the first to the second is like 1.5 or 2x, or would you say you have any sense, just looking, all things, everything else being held equal in terms of like implication?
So when we originally were working through the concepts with CAT, we had priced them out with a basis of design shelter manufacturer. And while all three shelter manufacturers or shelter designs look vastly different, they were within 10 to 15% of each other for cost. So we wanted to make sure that as stakeholder groups were giving feedback on shelter design, that it wasn't a situation where you're choosing a Cadillac over a Chevy or something like that, right? And so we wanted to make sure that we gave people options that were equitable. But as the shelters do increase for that kind of scalability of size, we haven't been talked or refined with CAT yet what those modules would be. So like if that middle size would be 1.5 times the first shelter that we saw for the typical kind of bus shelter size, if that was 1.5 times that, and then the next one up is 2 times, we were going to look at how many people were expected there and then transit level of service to help determine the footprint of those scalability of shelters. I hope that answers the question. If not, I can refine.
You're basically saying on an apples to apples basis, between the first design and the third design, there's
Correct.
maybe a 20% difference in cost.
Yeah.
Just, okay. That's
Just-
pretty impressive.
And I assume that the cost difference would vary depending on the size.
Yeah,
Correct.
sure.
Rather than the shape. Yeah.
Right,
Yep.
but seems like quite a bit of difference in terms of the first versus the third, in terms of the extra pieces you have on it and the shape of the roof and.
It has
seems
to.
more complex.
It's surprising what the shelter manufacturers are able to do. So if you get close enough to some of the ones that are in the catalog, they have strategies and economies with sizes of members. So what drove up the price of option 1 is the dual slope of the roof, right? So we have kind of the inverted V and it's not equal, it's offset, which is okay. They can do that, but it has lots of horizontal members as well. And so especially in that back screen, there's several articulations to kind of match the modularity of the window forming at the downtown transfer center. So those are all extra extrusions that cost money because aluminum is there. And then when you look at the curved piece, the extrusion of the curve is a cost. But if they already do extrusions of curves like that for other shelters, so they have the capabilities to do that, which makes that, again, not as expensive. And then when you get into the last option, you have the framed out kind of vertical column, which was more on the expensive range. And then you had the horizontality, but you had less framing members, which then changed the amount of aluminum that was in the shelter. Now, as we all know, I heard you guys talking about material availability and all of those kind of fun things. Prices are still swinging greatly based on availability. And as we continue to refine based off these inputs, we want to make sure that we are within CAT's budget and to be able to work through design tweaks to get to that point.
That's very helpful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
B, you had a question here.
Yes. I actually liked the one you first showed, with the roof like that. I'm always cognizant of taxpayers' dollars. I think your designs are absolutely beautiful. I don't know how functional they are because I think of the parent sitting there or the person, whoever standing there and the wind blowing in, well, mostly the rain. We do get rain, the rain coming in and even the sun fully hitting the person and everything. And I don't know how that is much different from just the pole where you're just standing waiting for the bus. I like something that's simple, frankly, practical. I do appreciate what Garland said about going the sides. He said, and if I've got this correct, Garland, you said it's important not to have the sides going all the way down because people will use it as a, homeless shelter type thing. Have we ever thought of having just some sides so that the rain doesn't get in? It's in the bottom, having the bottom part open in the back and the sides so that air is there. So it really doesn't keep you warm or sheltered in any way other than keeping the rain off of you. That's one, one consideration. I do like I think was item number, your second one, where it had the very large vertical saying where the street was. Okay. However, I think that would be very easy to kick and ruin and mess up because it's at the vertical level. At the bottom, you're going to have kids, just playing around, running into it. I would like to see that size actually at the top of any kind of a building or roof line, something like that. But I have some real concerns. I love all the designs, but once again, it's a question of taxpayers' dollars. I do like the idea that they can be enlarged. I thought that was very good. And as far as the benches, do you have benches where they have a metal?
This divider?
Yeah, the dividers, because that should be there, which doesn't enable people to actually sleep on the benches.
Those are great points. We definitely want to make sure that the bench dividers are there. And I think that we're hearing a lot of similar feedback in terms of rain and kind of protection. So I think that as we go through and incorporate people's comments, it's a game with the rain, right? So I think we heard comments about horizontal rain, right?
Yeah.
Most bus shelters can't protect you from horizontal rain unless they have kind of a front to it. And a part of what we talked about internally was defensible space. So looking at kind of crime prevention through environmental designs, right? Well, just in terms of trying to make sure people don't get stuck inside the shelter. So we left them more open, but then it's a game to look at the overhang of the roof and see how we can protect passengers against rain. So I think those are great comments that you guys made. We'll definitely be able to make sure our graphics and our studies reflect those comments in terms of protection of passengers.
It's not only the rain, but it's also the sun.
Okay.
You want to, you don't want someone sitting there waiting 30 minutes where the sun is directly hitting them. And if you have some kind of a roof line like that, people can at least stand and the sun won't be full force in their face, something lower or something, but having a darker roof that protects them from the sun, shelters them from the sun, because we have sun and we have rain. Oh, and let's not forget the snow, but
yeah, and ice. Don't forget the ice too.
Oh yeah, let's not forget the ice. But, not as often. It's mainly rain and really harsh sun, frankly. So those are my comments.
Thanks,
And the
Steve.
artwork I think is great if we can afford it. But I like simple. I like very where it's obvious. In fact, that one you had where it had the thing coming up with a picture of the bus, the little, what is it, lollipop? You called it. I thought that was great because that actually will meet the needs of people who maybe aren't reading the language, but they see the picture of the bus and I think that at least they can relate, oh, that's a bus stop. So
Thank you, Dee. About the artwork, I've been working with Garland for a couple of years now all around art at designated specific bus shelters. That artwork would need to be funded privately by neighborhoods. We wouldn't be using right. So, the murals that I've put up on Georgetown and Barracks and Hydraulic, they were all privately funded, so that's what we'd be talking about with art. And then not at every shelter. And neighborhoods could be involved in that artwork, but that's a whole different issue. Do you have anything else, Becca, or Dan?
Well, I don't know if I have to look this up, but FTA used to encourage art in
Yes.
transit. So
Yes.
you might get some funding for that, for art.
Yes, but I just don't want people to think that we're gonna use
Well,
the
that's true.
taxpayers' dollars for that art. We're gonna figure it out another way.
Sure.
And you're right, because they love it.
There's a one
Yeah.
percent.
1%.
1%.
Yeah.
But we're talking small amounts.
Yeah,
Well, if this is a $15,000
Yeah.
shelter.
yeah.
1% is.
Another approach,
Is the artwork.
you probably won't like this, but some places sell advertising in the shelters. And not only does that bring in revenue, it also helps maintain the shelter too. So not everybody likes stuff like
We
that.
like it.
I prefer to have the art, that's okay, we'll see.
I don't know how highfalutin you guys are here, so you might not like it.
So I do have a couple of quick questions. Have these all been run by VDOT? Because when you're talking about Albemarle County roads, and we're talking about a prototype that VDOT will approve,
So VDOT.
not so much the city, but the
VDOT is
council.
at our design, sure. I think they're waiting on the final changes or augmentations that will happen based on public feedback. And then we'll have another conversation with them. But these are all being designed to fit in the public right of way.
Okay, because that's critical for Albemarle County.
Yes.
They're VDOT roads, not city roads. And we have to have something that VDOT will approve or it doesn't work. Just, Becky, did you have another question?
And to pick up on two things that have been mentioned, of course, we have some shared bus stops, and so, be very interested in your APCs and what you trigger at what stops, and that we can all talk about that on grounds. We have certain design requirements there, but totally open to it. So, but we have about 20 shared stops through our systems from all three agencies. So just want to say that we're open to that. But I wanted to pick back up on something we mentioned about the identification of the shelter as a bus stop, and to really emphasize that. And some of the having the intersection listed there may or may not tell somebody that that's a bus stop. And so encourage that symbol or just that statement, or because if you just say we're at 5th and Market Street or something, somebody may not know that that's a bus stop. So my feedback would pick back up on what B is saying and take it a little further, and even say, as you put that writing, whether it's vertical or horizontal, to re-emphasize every change you get, that it's a bus stop. Whether it's civil
Part of what I heard you say, and I think I wholeheartedly agree, is that lollipop, if we can incorporate that in all of the designs, because it also signals everybody that it is a bus stop.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's like, that is the when you have the bus stop name horizontally up there on the eave of the lid of that thing, is that the bus stop sign, or would there also be a bus stop sign?
There will be a bus stop sign with the on somewhere that shows a bus picture that would identify, from my perspective, that would identify that this is a bus.
And it's on all of them, so that everybody knows,
Okay, so that would be in addition to making this intersection
Yeah,
there.
the wording is just to identify the location, but the lollipop is the symbolization that it's a bus stop.
Okay, thank you.
And just a couple of comments. I'm very concerned about shade and rain as well.
Okay.
Because when I drive, if people drive down the road and they see people at bus stops getting wet or roasting in the sun, they say, boy, I'm glad I don't have to ride a bus. I'm glad I'm in my car. And if we want to encourage people to get on transit, we've got to figure out a way to keep them at least somewhat dry, right? I'm just saying, and shady and not sitting on hot metal seats that have been in the sun all day.
Agreed.
This is a nerdy comment again, and maybe Jen is probably familiar with this. I used to work with a guy in Phoenix, architect, and he had a specialty of what he called climate design response. And he was able to use the angle of the shelter and the materials of the shelter to make it feel like it was actually cooler than really what it was. He's an example, for example, if you get out of the shower onto a tile floor, it feels cold, but if you put your hand on a towel, it's warmer. Even though physically those two things are the same, there are ways that you can use materials to create that same thing. He did that for the Phoenix light rail stations, and he cleaned up on that. So I don't know, if Jen's
We have kind of a fun situation here where we've got to make sure things stay cool and simultaneously warm, right? Depending on time of year, because no one wants to freeze themselves in the winter time either. And
But
so
it does get cold in Phoenix, and he was able to do both.
yes. Yes. And so there's a lot of thought that we can put into material placement. I think of one example of a bus intermodal we did in Savannah, Georgia, where we did implement a polycarbonate roof system that was interspersed with a actual standing seam metal roofing. So the polycarbonate was not clear. It was a white polycarbonate, so it was translucent. They measured the temperature underneath the polycarbonate area opposed to outside. It was about 10 degrees cooler. Everyone was really excited about that because, like you guys are saying, it stopped you from the direct sunlight. And so when you are looking at angles, you are looking at strategy of materiality, making sure that people feel bright under there too, especially if we don't have power or we're not able to actually power lights. We want to make sure people feel safe. And so there's a lot of different aspects that we can look at as part of these shelter designs. They look deceptively simple, and we're very early in design. And as we move through kind of understanding people's response, so everyone's comments are very helpful, then we can work on incorporating these in. And I think from a location standpoint, it is a bit challenging because we can't look necessarily at sun angles because we don't know if we're going to face north, south, east, or west, because we have those potentials or any variation of the above. So we have to make sure that we can kind of adapt with still maintaining a modularity so it's easy to maintain. And once CAT gets a shelter contract from a manufacturer, that they'll be able to order multiples. So we don't want each one to be different. So there's a lot of complexity into the shelter design, and you guys are spot on with the comments that you have here. So
one more comment. Given climate change and our temperatures, I'm more worried about people getting hot and being protected from the heat. They can always wear a heavy coat to stay warm.
Noted.
They can't start undressing in the shelter. You know what I'm trying to say.
Well, we hope that they don't. We hope they don't.
Just one other quick question, or to just trash. I will just remind everybody, and I know Garland and most people are aware, but the city has a way to pick up trash. The county does not. We have no, we don't have trash haulers or anything in the county. So I get a lot of requests for trash cans and even the current hole in the ground. But the problem is that the county doesn't have any way to pick it up.
So CAT is not designed to do the trash, we've had that conversation. Unless we are funded to create a unit to do that, it's almost impossible for us to do.
And we've actually started, in our parks, we have taken away some of the trash cans because people, it's not a good way to, and there's not a good way to pick them up. And so we're trying to encourage people to take out their trash, to take it with them. So I don't know where we go with that, but we're running out of time. Dee, go right ahead.
Quick question. If we were a regional transit authority, would we be able to then get Charlottesville to, pick up the trash cans if we were all working together?
Well, we would certainly have more money, wouldn't we?
There's other ways to just handle that. It could be the authority could actually contract with the service.
Right. Yeah. And it gets back to that authority piece. That's right. I guess.
Is it possible to get these slides?
Yes.
The presentation sent out would be great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll give it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody or comments? So I guess one quick last question, and I'm sorry for all my questions. You are looking though for a prototype to use in different places so that they're pretty much, we're not gonna have all different types all over the
We're
place.
looking to get to one design, to do the prototype, and then,
And then it can enlarge,
yeah.
but it's gonna be the same prototype. I think the solar piece is really.
Did I say that correct?
You did.
Okay, right. And the last question I have is, my understanding, Marlon, from when we've been talking about this is that obviously the city is a little different with their shelters.
Yes.
The county will be able, the county board of supervisors or whomever's on the authority will be able as a community to help prioritize where we might have those shelters along with you. You would be identifying them, and then they would come back to B, who could say, I know that Pantops spot needs a, and I know that the Commonwealth needs one. Okay, that's great.
So the listing will be done with updated figures, and we'll be able to provide that information.
Because we are one community, but we are in way different communities, because we have different governance models and structures. Okay, it's good. Any other comments or questions? This was great. I loved it. Brian, you look like you had one.
Yeah, we spoke on the phone a few ago about the RTA legislation.
Yes.
Was there, it seems like when I'm talking about, was there a need to sort of, I know there is some sort of enabling legislation for an RTA. Has that been revisited lately to know whether it's still like would work or whatever we'll do is constraining during constraining all those things?
Yeah, that's great. Within the scope of work for the governance study, it is review the existing legislation and make any recommendations on any changes based on what comes out of that governance study.
Yeah, and that's really great because we were told that they needed some tweaks.
Okay, one more.
The governance study,
Yes.
she's gonna announce at the end that the
Okay.
CTV, you wanna go ahead and announce?
Sure, I'm happy, I was gonna say this later, but I'm happy to announce that the CDB approved funding for our governance study. And they also approved our on-demand pilot, which is great. So they did what, just yesterday, I think, yesterday. The Commonwealth Transportation Board. Those are the big money ones that have the vote. So we know those are, have been approved, so that's really wonderful. Good news for everybody.
And so that study, the tail end of the transit vision plan will overlap with the beginning of the governance study. So we'll be starting it, August, September of this year, and it'll go approximately 14 months.
So exciting times because we'll be coming back and talking about the governance and possibly an authority and moving. In the meantime, maybe the timing will be good for what you're doing here. So the stars are aligning. We just have to be patient.
We're hoping.
Lots of good work going on.
Lots of good work. It's a fact. All right, and I'm your official timekeeper, so I do want to move us on. Jen, thank you very much. And if you could send out both of these presentations.
I just sent them.
Both of them, that's great. All right, thank you, dear. We
Thank you
appreciate
guys so much. We appreciate it. Bye.
That was great. So first transit provider update is Ted from JAUNT.
Just real quickly, on Monday, we're kicking off our alternative fuel study, where we're trying to determine which direction JAUNT should go in terms of having a cleaner, more greener bus operations. Hal's on the committee. Lucas is going to be our chair on that. The study parallels some of the work that will be done with CAP. And our committee will be an advisory group composed of some cross section of our community. And Jody's done a good job in assembling that. So we're starting that on Monday. So
That's great, and you'll be coming back to us, I hope, at the end of it, with whatever you
we will.
decide.
We will.
Are you, how long is that study?
I think about 5 months.
5 months, so it's not, that's great. Yeah. All right, anything else?
That's it.
Okay, and Charmaine is not here from Albemarle County. Becca?
And so UTS right now, of course, is running recess service because the academic session is much reduced during the summer. That means, however, that all the employee shuttles, they run the same all through the year, but we have reduced some of those routes that serve the student academic session. I will be getting in touch with these guys about a lot of construction that is still ahead of us on McCormick Road, which will affect the trolley route and some other stuff, and it could be pretty impactful. So, more to come on that. The multiple projects that are affecting it are just now coordinating all their impacts, but it's basically from Emmett Street at McCormick Road to Alderman and McCormick Road, which is right where the trolley runs. UTS is planning our full service in the fall. We had been running a reduced headway for since COVID started. We reduced our headways, but we're about ready to announce what our fall headways will be, which will be getting back closer to what they were pre-pandemic, but we still haven't restaffed enough to go all the way back. Time between buses, I'm sorry. Talk about nerds. We're all like trans nerds in here, so. But you know, other pressures are on all of us now, and I just would say this aloud, you know, about the requirement to be as efficient as we absolutely possibly can. And before it was because of COVID, then it was because of driver shortage, then it's supply chain, and now it's diesel costs. And so it's just a reminder over and over that we really should be efficient with everything we do, but these diesel costs are really kicking our butt. I don't know about y'all, so.
I don't use diesel.
Yeah, so anyway, that's our update. Thank you.
Okay, great. Carl.
I'm not gonna take up a lot more time, is that we are concerned about the diesel costs ourselves, the state, and I believe BTA, we're looking at what the additional diesel costs, how it impacts both transit agencies. I think they were working on even potentially trying to fund the difference, talk for Neil, but that's a welcome piece for transit providers. Our numbers have been fairly low. One of the things that, having our fleet that's, we're not running optimal, our numbers are a little down. We'd love to report that that's not the case, but eventually we'll get there. We're just concerned about the timing of getting the parts in to get the repairs done. That's growing. It's been longer than what we anticipated. We thought it was a couple of months for regular Joe parts are taking 6-7 months to get. A chassis, something for the chassis is now a 13-month project that we ordered over a year ago.
Yeah, I've been here 2 years or something. All right. Neil, the RPT.
And I guess just to go over quickly what you all just mentioned, that the Commonwealth Transportation Board has approved all the projects, and so certainly we're excited about what's going on in Charlottesville, Albemarle, and I think that's probably the biggest highlight that we've been going over the last few months, and certainly I guess hopefully the governor has signed the budget, so we had some procurement issues that we needed to overcome because of conflicts between state and federal that had to be in the governor's budget. And so we will hopefully in the first week of July be issuing a procurement, advertising procurement for 12-year buses that we hope will be available for transit systems to use in September, starting in September and October. It will have electric 12 years, diesel, we will have commuter coaches, and 12-year trolleys should all be included in that package. So.
Any questions for Neil? Good to hear electric.
Yeah, electric, yes, certainly a lot of electric, so.
Yeah, that's good. All right, any other comments or questions? All right, with that then, other business, my only other business is to remind everybody that we do not have a July meeting. We got to bring smiles to faces. And that our next meeting will be August the 25th. Here in person in the same location we are right now. And let me just open it up. Does anybody else have any other business they wanted to mention or listen?
Tonight we have our public meeting for the regional transit vision plan at 6:30. It'll be on Zoom.
Oh, on Zoom. Okay. Anything else?
Would be like a summary of the feedback comes out, or we watch it?
We're still, oh.
I wanted to see it
At the
tonight.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll be recorded.
Christine, the question you're asking, yes. is the answer.
So we can say it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There will also be, we're gonna do an in-person event at the transit center to talk with transit riders, also to get their feedback on the regional transit vision plan. So we're trying to wait to make sure that that the center will be open and staffed, and so we will also be doing that as part of our public outreach.
We'll make sure that somebody's there to answer.
Yeah, thank you.
And I was wrong, my calendar has something else on it, so. Anyway, all right, we're good. Thank you very much. Have a lovely July, and we will see you back August the 25th. Great presentations. Thanks, everybody. And bye-bye, you guys in the stratosphere.
Rick's comments to students. Meeting in person.
You guys, I had to go see.
Well,
Sorry.